Is that too high up? Thank you. Just
we live? Hello, everyone. I'm Myron Brilliant. I'm the Executive Vice President of the United States Chamber of Commerce, head of International Affairs. It's a delight on early St. Patrick's Day to celebrate this occasion with the Taoiseach of Ireland, Micheál Martin. We're delighted to have you here today. Of course, instead of virtual, next year, let's hope this is in person. Our tradition has always been to have the Taoiseach come to the U.S. Chamber and speak from the Hall of Flags. And of course, during your annual trip across the Atlantic, millions of Americans welcome you. I will say that this is a special day, not just for the Irish or for the Irish Americans, but for all Americans who celebrate this occasion. Of course, President Biden made this March a very special time, called it the Irish Heritage Month to celebrate the relationship between Ireland and America. And of course, our president is an Irish American who feels very strongly and often quotes Yeats in his dealings with foreign leaders. It's a privilege, as I said, to have hosted the Taoiseach's predecessors, and I hope we can welcome him back to the United States next year. There's a lot to talk about in the U.S.-EU relationship, in the transatlantic relationship, and also, obviously, in the U.S.-Irish relationship. Our ties with Ireland are broad and deep. They're cultural, they're historic, but they're also big in terms of economic ties. We have $580 billion of two-way investment, over 480,000 jobs in the relationship between trade and investment. U.S. firms account for 20% of the jobs in Ireland. And of course, American affiliates export more from Ireland than anywhere else in the world. So if you think about the relationship, it's deep, it's extensive, it's historical, and it's very important that Ireland continues to be a bridge between the United States and Europe. And of course, Ireland has important ties with the UK, which I'm sure the Taoiseach will talk about today. Hundreds of American companies proudly call Ireland their home away from home. And that's including many who are participating in today's conversation, innovative companies in the IT, life sciences, and financial services, among many other sectors. Ireland has always played a very critical role in the EU, especially focused on digital transformation and sustainable and green recovery will continue. And I'm sure the Taoiseach will speak to these themes in his comments in a minute. Whether it's keeping global markets open and integrated, on promoting ambitious responses to the climate challenge, working with the private sector will be necessary if we're going to see the investments that have to be made in innovation. And we know we can always count on our partners and our relationship with our friends in Dublin. We'll get to the policy agenda in a minute. For now, let me underline how committed we are to work with you, Taoiseach, the European counterparts of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and the Biden administration to revitalize and reinvigorate transatlantic ties. In recent weeks, I've had the chance to speak to both the Secretary of State and the National Security Advisor, Tony Blinken, and of course, Jake Sullivan, about this transatlantic relationship. And it's clear from the president to his foreign policy team to his economic team that everyone understands that we have to strengthen and double down on our transatlantic relationship, and that Ireland will play a very critical role in that endeavor. It's very appropriate, therefore, that you are going to be the first European leader to hold a formal bilateral, albeit virtual, conversation tomorrow with President Biden. The recent announcement, in our view, of a 4-month suspension of tariffs on the WTO dispute on subsidies to the civil aircraft sector is a welcome step in the right direction to strengthen our relationship. There's more work to be done, however, to eliminate tariffs, to resolve the outstanding Section 232 tariffs, and frankly, to conclude in other areas, importantly, to have a EU-US Privacy Shield Agreement 2.0. Let me just say a little bit about the Taoiseach, since he is the person that will be speaking in a minute. Micheál Martin has been the Taoiseach since June of 2020. He leads a first of its kind three-way coalition government. He found a way to collectively, I think, collaboratively and effectively work with longtime rivals. We support working across party lines, and maybe he has some lessons for the Democrats and Republicans and how to get it better done here in the United States. But as a leader of the Fianna Fáil party, he's held several ministerial posts, including as foreign affairs, enterprise, trade and employment, health and children, and education and science. So he really understands all the undertakings of government and has had several important portfolios. He's an avid sportsman, a lifelong supporter of the Nemo Rangers Hurling and Football Club. Maybe he'll give us an update on how they are. He joined the club at the age of 10. Perhaps he can explain hurling to all of us, because I'm very confused personally by the sport. But he has many other interesting attributes. Beyond his love of poetry, he enjoys open water swimming all year round, swimming in the Irish Sea in January. I'm not going to call him nuts. I'll just say it's pretty invigorating that he has done that. But Taoiseach, you're a man of obviously great strength and courage. And here today, you are going to award medals to two distinguished Irishmen who I think deserve great recognition. I'm not going to steal your thunder by telling everyone right now their names, but what I can tell you is that the Science Foundation Ireland St. Patrick's Day Science Medal is awarded annually to a distinguished scientist, engineer, or industry leader living and working in the United States with strong Irish connections. Taoiseach, there's a lot to talk about today, but first I want to turn over to you to open the floor and to have you offer the distinguished award out today. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Myron, and thank you for the kind introduction and invitation to join you today. And may I say that a swim in the Irish Atlantic is probably one of the most therapeutic things you could ever do, and I would highly recommend it to you when you get across to Ireland at some stage. As you know, Myron, Ireland has enjoyed an excellent relationship with the US Chamber of Commerce over many years. Earlier this morning, I had the opportunity to convey my congratulations to your new Chief Executive Officer, Suzanne Clark. And let me take this opportunity to commend you and your team for the great work in organising this year's St. Patrick's Day virtual gathering. It would be remiss of me not to acknowledge Suzanne's predecessor, Tom Donoghue, who has been a true friend of Ireland over the course of his leadership of the Chamber. I wish him all the very best for the future and look forward to continuing our connection through Suzanne and with the Chamber's members, many of whom are key players in the vibrant Ireland-US two-way trade and investment relationship. This year's St. Patrick's Day celebration is, of course, virtual, as has become commonplace for most of our engagements over the past 12 months. While this is very welcome, I am, of course, very much looking forward to being able to travel to the United States and meeting with you all again in person in the not too distant future. St. Patrick's Day offers us an opportunity to celebrate the extraordinarily deep and important bond between Ireland and the United States, a connection that spans family, cultural, political, and economic ties that go back centuries and which are primed to continue for years to come. Many of us also remember how such ties were instrumental in helping us achieve peace on the island of Ireland. Indeed, the support from members of Congress and President Biden himself was significant in ensuring that in the final analysis, the European Union United Kingdom withdrawal agreement protects the Good Friday Agreement and that there was no return to a hard border on the island of Ireland as a result of Brexit. But I would like to focus this morning on the economic ties that bind our two countries and that have grown ever stronger in recent years. At the heart of this relationship are the Irish and American businesses that export, invest, and innovate across our two nations. The American Chamber of Commerce published its Ireland-US Business Report for 2021 just last week. The report celebrates 60 years of our rich relationship and reflects on the journey that Ireland has taken during that time. From an inward-looking economy to the open, technologically advanced society that we are today. The vision of Sean Lemass and T.K. Whitaker over 60 years ago and the Programme for Economic Expansion began a process that led to our joining what is now the European Union in the 1970s. Today, our economy is strong, and with the critical boost of foreign direct investment, we are to the forefront of cutting-edge research, development, and innovation. The United States is our largest single trading partner and biggest source of investment. As our trade and investment relationship has matured, it has become incredibly strong and increasingly two-way. It is quite remarkable that Ireland is 1/70th the size of the United States in population terms, but we are your 9th biggest source of foreign direct investment. There are over 800 American companies present in Ireland, employing over 180,000 people. In the other direction, there are over 650 Irish companies in America, employing 110,000 people. That is extraordinary. From a trade perspective, Ireland exports over 45 billion euro worth of goods to America each year, while America exports over 50 billion worth of services to Ireland. And this reflects the highly integrated and mutually beneficial relationship between our two economies. One example that has been seriously stress tested over the past 12 months of the pandemic is the strength of the life sciences sector within Ireland. Within this sector, Ireland and the US have highly integrated supply chains, with Ireland acting as a secure and resilient transatlantic bridge for the export of goods into the wider European Union internal market and further afield, as well as supplying the US market with intermediary products. Indeed, the trade balance between our two countries reflects this in the flow of services from the US into Ireland and goods and profits moving from Ireland back into the US. Clearly, the US-Europe transatlantic relationship, as a pillar of the global economy, has enormous potential to help our societies and economies on both sides of the Atlantic to build back better, to borrow President Biden's phrase. The extraordinary supports put in place on both sides of the Atlantic have helped protect incomes and livelihoods and will ensure that our economies return to growth. At the European Union level, 1.8 trillion euros from the Multi-Financial Framework and Recovery and Resilience Fund has been put in place to bolster the very significant money being invested by member state governments. In Ireland, significant fiscal supports, which our finance ministry estimate may reach as much as 38 billion euros over the course of the pandemic, are being invested to protect jobs, incomes, and public health. Ireland entered the pandemic in a position of strength, with a fast-growing economy, a labour market nearing full employment, and a stable fiscal position. While we continue to battle with the pandemic, our economic performance has remained strong. Knowledge-intensive sectors proved resilient, and as a result of the strength of exports, particularly in the pharma and ICT sectors, GDP actually grew in 2020. While our economy performed remarkably well, despite the double impacts of COVID and Brexit, some sectors have been badly affected. Our tourism, hospitality, entertainment, and aviation sectors have been hit. Before COVID, Ireland attracted over 2 million visitors from North America and was the 6th most popular destination for US students seeking to study abroad. These people-to-people connections are at the heart of our bilateral relationship, so we are very much looking forward to opening our doors again to all our American friends when it is safe to do so. Despite the adversity, Irish companies, researchers, and innovators have been at the center of efforts to fight the pandemic. For example, ICON, who are participating in this conference and who employ approximately 5,000 people across the United States, oversaw a number of COVID-19 trials for vaccines and antiviral treatments. software development firm Nearform worked with my government's health service executive to develop Ireland's national COVID tracker app, and its technology is now being used in states in America, in New York, New Jersey, Delaware, and Philadelphia, and further afield. And Verifly, a mobile health passport, was developed by Irish biometric identity assurance specialist Dayon, and would help enable international travel to adapt to the health challenges posed by the pandemic. Irish scientists have also been at the heart of the global response to COVID. Dr. Mike Ryan in the World Health Organization, Emer Cook in the European Medicines Agency, Dr. Gordon Joyce, who leads a team of virologists who worked on vaccine treatments at Walter Reed Army Institute in Maryland, and Professors Adrian Hill and Theresa Lamb, who led the team of scientists at Oxford University that helped develop the AstraZeneca vaccine. We are aware, however, that many countries across the world are in the midst of reviewing their international supply chains. And I note the executive order that President Biden recently made here in the United States. Friends and partners must work together to ensure that supply chains are resilient, especially for essential goods and services that are needed to defeat this pandemic and to help keep our economies buoyant. Ireland has played an important role in keeping COVID-related goods moving. We were ranked as the 5th top global exporter of COVID-related goods by the OECD last year. This was achieved through a time of national lockdown and in the face of greatly diminished air transport routes. In this regard, Ireland has proven to be a trusted partner to the United States. We now need to ensure that full attention is brought to defeating this pandemic and delivering a resilient recovery. Ireland is well positioned to remain a competitive market for international business to access the wider EU internal market. We have consolidated our reputation as a stable, business-friendly, globally competitive country with a multicultural, highly educated and talented workforce. Furthermore, my government is delivering policies that will equip Ireland to remain competitive as the future of work evolves. Ireland's Industry 4.0 strategy 2020 to 2025 seeks to position Ireland as a competitive, innovation-driven manufacturing hub at the frontier of the fourth industrial revolution and at the forefront of Industry 4.0 development and adoption. Our national remote work strategy, published in January 2021, will ensure that remote work is a permanent feature of the Irish workplace in a way that maximizes economic, social, and environmental benefits and retains talent. Through our National Economic Recovery Plan and Future Jobs Ireland, the government is committed to creating the right environment for new jobs through increased competitiveness, skills development, and a powerful enterprise mix of Indigenous Irish enterprises and the foreign direct investment sector. In recent decades, we have seen the rise of emerging economic powers, but it is important to recognize that the Transatlantic Partnership is still an essential and powerful pillar of the global economy. The combined output of the EU and US accounts for a third of world GDP and is responsible for half of all global personal consumption. Trade flows into and out of the transatlantic economy represent nearly a third of global exports and imports and are responsible for roughly 60% of all inward and outward investment. We are working to resolve trade disputes that have stifled economic growth in recent years. I was heartened by the recent decision by both the US and the European Union to agree to suspend tariffs as we work together to resolve the Airbus-Boeing WTO dispute. This is an encouraging signal of intent, and I look forward to working together to ensure free and fair trade, reform of the WTO, and setting the global rules and standards for emerging technologies, future networks, and advanced manufacturing. All of these factors will provide substantial impetus to drive global economic growth. An important part of achieving this agenda will be establishing the European Union-US Trade and Technology Council, and I very much hope this will lead us lead to us working together on the coalescing strands of trade, technology, and security. Both the EU Commission, President von der Leyen, US President Biden, and their respective teams have delivered clear statements of intent to work closely together on shared priorities. Priorities such as ensuring global health and countering future pandemics, working together on economic recovery through green and digital transitions, and tackling malign influences through strengthened international and multilateral institutions. Ireland will contribute to furthering these global goals, and we will play to the full a distinctive and positive role in advancing transatlantic relations. Having spoken today of the important contribution made by Irish scientists and businesses in the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic, I am delighted on behalf of the Government of Ireland and Science Foundation Ireland to celebrate and recognise the careers of two distinguished individuals who have made outstanding contributions within the field of science in Ireland and America. Professor William C. Campbell and Vincent T. Roche are the esteemed recipients of the 2021 Science Foundation Ireland St. Patrick's Day Science Medal. The medal celebrates US-Ireland scientific relations and the long-standing history our countries have of collaborating across a diverse range of sectors. And I can proudly say today that in the fields of science, technology, engineering, and maths, our collaborations with the United States are at their strongest, with over 450 academic collaborations and 250 industry collaborations. In addition, the US-Ireland R&D program, which is a unique initiative involving funding agencies across 3 jurisdictions, the USA, Ireland, and Northern Ireland, have supported over 60 successful research partnerships to date. Both Professor Campbell and Mr. Roche embody the significant achievements and contributions of the Irish diaspora. Today, we proudly recognise their tenacity and innovation, which is symbolic of the enduring strength and durability of our great bilateral relationship. The outstanding leadership both have demonstrated in their respective fields is far-reaching and visionary. Jerry Bourne and Donegal raised Professor William C. Campbell, who is this year's recipient of the SFI St. Patrick's Day Medal for Academia, is a graduate of Trinity College, Dublin. A Fulbright travel grant brought him to the University of Wisconsin, Madison, USA, where he undertook a PhD on liver fluke. Professor Campbell went on to work for the pharmaceutical company Merck at its Institute for Therapeutic Research until 1990. Professor Campbell is a research fellow emeritus with Drew University, Madison, New Jersey in USA. Professor Campbell's work in the development of ivermectin and medications used to treat parasite infestations helped lower the incidence of river blindness and lymphatic apheresis and led to his joint Nobel Prize Award, shared with Japanese scientist Professor Satoshi Omura. Professor Campbell spearheaded the decision by Merck to distribute that cure free to millions of people in what became one of the first and foremost examples of a public-private partnership in international health. Ivermectin is currently being investigated as a treatment for COVID-19. Professor Campbell, for your contribution to combating global diseases and your groundbreaking research, I'm delighted to virtually present you with the Science Foundation Ireland St. Patrick's Day Medal for Academia with my sincere congratulations.
Well, thank you. It's good to remember where you've come from, and I quickly take this opportunity to send greetings to the people of Remilton and other places in Ireland where I have special connections. But it's also good to be remembered by your homeland. So this award from Science Foundation Ireland is a very special honor indeed, and made more special by being presented by the Taoiseach. And I thank you, sir, for doing that. I know that the people of Ireland welcome you, And I hope that their welcome will be vigorous as well as virtual. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Patrick. And recipient of the SFI St. Patrick's Day Science Medal for Industry, and Mr. Vincent T. Roach is the President and Chief Executive Officer of Analog Devices and a leader in the field of semiconductors. Originally from Wexford, Mr. Roach graduated from the then NIHE Limerick, now University of Limerick, before going on to join Analog Devices in the early 1990s. In 2013, he became the third CEO to lead the company. In 2017, Mr. Roach received an honorary doctorate in engineering from the University of Limerick. Throughout his career, Mr. Roach has been inspired and driven by an awareness of the profound impact semiconductor technology has across so many dimensions of our lives. Analog Devices is a world leader in high-performance analog, mixed signal and digital signal processing integrated circuits for the industrial, automotive, communications, healthcare, and consumer markets. Under Mr. Roach, ADI has deepened and broadened its technology portfolio and approach to innovation. His vision and leadership have helped make Analog Devices a critical strategic partner to thousands of leading companies around the world, earning Mr. Roach a place among the Forbes 100 innovators in 2019. Analog has long established links with the Irish research community, in particular with UCC and the Tyndall National Institute based in Cork, and with the University of Limerick, with Analog both investing directly in research projects in the Irish research ecosystem and also being a key partner in national strategic research programs such as the SFI research centres. Vincent Roach's contributions to the Irish economy and R&D and innovation ecosystem and his leadership at Analog Devices makes him a deserved recipient of the Science Foundation Ireland St. Patrick's Day Medal for Industry. I offer you my sincere congratulations on this occasion.
Thank you so much, Taoiseach, and thank you also to the many organizations and people who have made this distinctive award possible. I'm truly humbled by this tremendous honor and really inspired by the vision and also the deep commitment to collaborative research and innovation that it represents. Analog Devices' many decades of endeavor in bringing cutting-edge technologies and applications to life through its Irish operations is part of a larger global pursuit of innovation to improve human lives. And this is a pursuit I know that Ireland and many of you watching today also share. So thank you so much, and a very happy St. Patrick's Day.
Thank you, Vincent.
Well, congratulations, Professor Campbell, and of course to Vincent as well for being awarded this distinguished, in fact, very distinguished award by the Taoiseach. Taoiseach, I was remiss at the outset in not acknowledging your fantastic ambassador to the United States and the entire embassy team for their work in support of the Irish-U.S. relationship and, frankly, their support in working with the U.S. Chamber. Ambassador Dan Mulhall is a terrific advocate for your country and represents your country very well in the United States and is well known by many in Washington of influence. I also wanted to acknowledge your thanks to Tom Donahue. Tom and I have hosted, I don't know, the past 4 or 5 Taoiseachs over our years. I've worked with Tom for 24 years, but it's an exciting new chapter under Suzanne Clark, and thank you for recognizing her leadership as well today. We don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to try to go quickly with some of the questions. You covered a lot of ground. I do think that this issue around tourism that's so important to your country and the people-to-people exchanges is an area where, of course, we want to support engagement on the business side, but we want to see people traveling back to your country soon. In your discussions with President Biden tomorrow, and again, congratulations on being the first European leader to have this formal bilat with the United States president. What do you hope to be the takeaway? What is the key messages? I assume you're going to cover the green growth agenda, because sustainable agenda is high on the climate agenda is high on your list. It's high on his. I assume you'll get into areas around the transatlantic relationship, including the EU Privacy Shield agreement. But give us a flavor of what you hope to accomplish in your talks with the president tomorrow.
Well, fundamentally, we want to strengthen that long-standing bilateral relationship on many fronts: economic, cultural and artistic. You mentioned Ambassador Mulhall, who is a true champion of Yeats and Irish poetry more generally, and I want to thank him for his great service to Ireland as ambassador. But before that, I worked with him on the European agenda in a key referendum over a decade ago, which consolidated Ireland's position within the European Union. But the economic relationship is obviously a key part of tomorrow's agenda. Obviously, we will update the president on Brexit, the outworkings of Brexit, and thank him for his consistent support of Ireland, and particularly the peace process. Always has been consistent in that. And I spoke to him after his election in November. His affection for Ireland runs very deep, and I'm looking forward to an enriched and enhanced relationship into the future. And we'll cover a number of areas tomorrow. COVID-19, obviously, how we emerge from COVID-19 in terms of economic recovery, and then also that key transatlantic relationship between Europe and the United States, and how Ireland can play an important role in facilitating the advancement of that transatlantic relationship. And just to say that there's been a strong welcome across all EU member states, as I've experienced at EU Council meetings, to the President's statements and his decisions since being elected, particularly in relation to climate change and the return to the Paris Accord, WHO, and his commitment to multilateralism more generally.
Taoiseach, the climate agenda is a very important one, and I do want to ask you where you see the EU heading in terms of the green growth agenda, but also Secretary Kerry echoed concerns that many of us have about this carbon border adjustment mechanism. Is this an excuse for trade barriers? I know you don't believe in those. Tell us a little bit about where you see the agenda going, and how does this carbon border adjustment mechanism fit into the green growth agenda, and how does it impact EU-US ties?
Well, first of all, I think we need to be clear. Europe is very committed to a far stronger climate change agenda right out to 2050, and over the next decade, significant reductions in greenhouse gas emissions. So that's a very genuine commitment from the European Union, but also a very challenging one. We had a significant meeting some months ago in relation to it, which it was a very lengthy meeting, over 23 hours. So that gives you an illustration of the challenges to pull 27 member states together around broad climate goals. In terms of the carbon adjustment mechanism, no clear proposal has emerged yet on the table, and that will happen, I think, towards the summertime. But we're very clear that it cannot be used as a mechanism to cloak protectionist urges. No way. Our view is, as I've said, we are an open economy. Ireland believes that the free trade agenda is key. So we'll be watching, obviously, very carefully on that front. So I think there's a bit of a journey to go yet in relation to that. I think actually, in terms of climate, the US and Europe will find common ground. And I think the early meeting between President von der Leyen and President Biden has been a good one. I think they took early decisions on tariffs, which gives confidence and creates a foundation for a stronger relationship. I think that will reflect itself on the climate agenda, and that we work constructively and sensibly together in relation to this. There are issues there. There are genuine issues around that carbon border adjustment mechanism that have to be dealt with, but it cannot be used as a cover for protectionism. That is not its intention, and that is something we will resist very much.
Taoiseach, thank you for that answer. We could not agree more with you that we need to remove barriers, not impose barriers. And we think the suspension of the tariffs in the Airbus-Boeing dispute is a good first step. There's more work to be done, and we're encouraged by messages from President Biden and his foreign policy team about removing the 232 tariffs, and the U.S. Chamber will continue to push that message forward. I want to take you to another interesting and complex area of our relationship, and that's the issue around privacy and data flows. As you know, we're very hopeful that the United States and the EU will reach another Privacy Shield 2.0 agreement. I mentioned to you privately that I had a very productive conversation with Jake Sullivan, who's also an Irish American, who echoed the feeling that there will be a proposal soon. But there are concerns. There are concerns that individual states, including your own, have developed potential policies. And we want to know where you are, because Ireland has been such a forefront in encouraging innovation, allowing American companies to prosper in your country. And the issue of transatlantic data flows is such an important one to get right. What's your sense of where we are and where we can make progress and how quickly?
Well, again, it is a challenging area, Myron, and the balancing of protecting citizens' rights with good quality, data flow and transatlantic data flow. So I do believe, and I've heard what you said in terms of your conversations with Jake Sullivan, and I do think that there is opportunities here, particularly in terms of the establishment of a Technology and Trade Council, that we can create fora and mechanisms between the US and Europe that could resolve issues of this kind, again, in a constructive and a sensible way. I believe that given the start that the two administrations have already had in respect of some issues, that this is something we can make progress on. Ireland will remain a supporter of innovation and very committed to that. And we understand the importance of this for you and your companies, given the very strong presence in Ireland as well. And it's really about balancing the competing rights and challenges and getting a proper framework in place. I think I think we can get a proper framework in place that would be satisfactory to all sides.
Well, I think it's absolutely critical that the United States and the EU reach this privacy agreement sooner rather than later, just because data privacy, data governance are becoming such huge issues, not just for the transatlantic relationship, but obviously in our dealings with China and many other countries around the world. Let me switch to two other areas quickly. One is taxation. You know that digital taxes has been another issue on the table. The U.S. Chamber has supported an OECD solution. I wonder where you are, where the Irish government is in this regard, because we've not only seen member states adopt a digital tax platform, but we've also seen it in other countries outside the EU. We're believers in the OECD capacity, and the United States needs to contribute here. And I'm sorry about the echo in the background, but hopefully you can hear the question. And the other one I want to get to you in the same sequence is around financial services. You have the Brexit deal between the UK and the EU, but there are a number of areas, the Northern Ireland border, and of course, the issue around UK EU equivalency. And I just wonder your reflections about how the Brexit deal is working and what next steps are needed there to provide more stability.
Well, first of all, in terms of the tax issue, our sense is the momentum is moving back towards the OECD forum.
Good.
Ireland is committed to the OECD process, and there are some indications that the US administration has put proposals on the table around minimum tax rates and that. So our view is that this ideally is an issue that should be resolved within the OECD framework. That doesn't mean that some EU member states and the EU Commission may not move or seek to move on digital tax within the European competency or within the European jurisdiction. But I think if the OECD forum gets momentum, which I believe it is, then I think that will be potentially will become the framework within which these issues get resolved. The Irish 12.5% stays, and that is a clear commitment from Ireland in terms of consistency and certainty around our corporation tax rate. And we will always seek, as a country, to be competitive on that front, understanding its importance in terms of the wider industrial competitiveness of Ireland in the global framework. In terms of Brexit, it's 2.5 months old. We're thankful that we've had a trade and cooperation agreement which avoids tariffs and avoids quotas. That's a plus. It also underpins peace in Northern Ireland. It avoids a hard border on the island of Ireland. It also allows Northern Ireland access to the European single market, which I think over time will prove advantageous to the Northern Ireland economy, while also retaining access, obviously, to the GB market for Northern Ireland. What's critical now is that both governments and the European Union, the Irish government and the British government, concentrate on making this work. Even the tariff absent, quota absent trade agreement has created significant bureaucracy for those companies trading with Britain and vice versa. A lot more custom clearance documents, form filling, and so on. So there are challenges there. There have been challenges with the protocol, but there are mechanisms within the agreement, within the withdrawal agreement between the EU and Great Britain, that allow these issues to be dealt with and resolved. That's the forum within which they should be resolved. We're not happy with sort of unilateral decisions by the UK government in respect of postponing dates for applying aspects of the agreement and not proceeding. That's not helpful. That adds to instability, something Northern Ireland doesn't require. It also corrodes trust within the EU. And that is a worry for Ireland, that the UK's decisions is not really conducive to more sustainable, constructive relationships between the European Union and the United Kingdom, which ultimately is the way to go. I mean, our view is that the United States, Europe, and the United Kingdom share common values around freedom of speech, parliamentary democracies, clear commitments that underpin our societies. We should be aligned and working together. There is a sense that the politics of Brexit is still playing out within the UK political environment. And historically, EU bashing has been a feature of United Kingdom domestic politics. I was hoping post-Brexit that might ease somewhat. The signs are it's still, to a certain extent, alive and well. And I think there's now a need to move beyond that, frankly. Britain has left. It's a decision I regret, because I think Britain has an awful lot to offer Europe. Ireland wants to maintain a very strong relationship with the United Kingdom, but equally we want to see the UK and the EU really get onto a constructive, sustainable pathway.
I think you ended on the right. I appreciate all the answer, but I think the notion of a constructive and pragmatic relationship between the EU and the UK is critical, frankly, for the United States, who wants both a strong transatlantic relationship, but understands the UK's special role in areas like national security and in economic terms. Let me, I know we are limited on time, but you mentioned the Trade and Technology Council. Are there certain priorities there that you would outline early on? Certainly one area that we're watching is the relationship with China. This is monopolizing a lot of our time in the United States. And do you see the EU, do you see this EU-US Trade and Technology Council as being a platform to really establish the high standard rules and convergence between the United States and the EU that will help us in dealing with third country issues?
I think it is. I think it's a badly needed forum and should perhaps have been established earlier. And I think it will deal with that nexus between trade, technology, and security. And there are many challenging issues on that agenda. But I think at least it creates a mechanism, a forum for constructive dialogue and engagement between the two administrations. And that, from my experience, is key to progressing these issues in a sensible way.
Taoiseach, last question. This is a very important one. You are Taoiseach at a time when you aren't able to travel to the United States for St. Patrick's Day, and that's a great loss for millions of Americans who enjoy the environment. What would you be doing on St. Patrick's Day as Taoiseach, and more importantly, what would you be doing if you weren't Taoiseach celebrating St. Patrick's Day?
You mean what would I be doing on St. Patrick's Day if I was in the US, is it?
Yeah.
I would have a very hectic day. I'd clearly be meeting with President Biden, Vice President Harris, and of course Speaker Pelosi, and of course our great friends, the Friends of Ireland, chaired by Richie Neal, and they would have enjoyed those meetings, and indeed meetings with yourselves, the Chamber, and other key partners in terms of the economic relationship, and then cultural and artistic and relationships as well that are well rooted in terms of the Irish-American relationship. And so that's what we would normally be doing, and it would be a hectic day, but an enjoyable one that sort of re-embeds that relationship. Or really,
and if you weren't Taoiseach?
If I wasn't Taoiseach, I could be in Cork. There's kind of a traditional series of services that we do. We go to the Church of Ireland in the morning, and then the Catholic Church after that for services and that. And we have a Patrick's Day parade, and in the city, there are parades all over Ireland normally in a non-COVID environment, and about halfway through the day, then we get the rest of the day off, which I walk. I always see Patrick's Day as a turning point. It really kind of represents leaving winter behind. Truly, I know we're in spring, but you get my feeling. From then on, you're into summer, so it's a nice time of the year, and I see it as kind of a turning point, and it's an enjoyable, reflective day for me, and that's how I see it.
Well, Taoiseach, I was expecting you to say something about downing a Guinness beer and swimming in the Atlantic Ocean. I have a wonderful house in North Carolina. Anytime you want to go swimming in the Atlantic in August, you're more than welcome, and I'll join you. If you go in January, not so clear, but I'm glad to see that you're a man of many talents. I
take you up on that. By the way, could I say, when I was a minister in my earlier years, I missed a lot of St. Patrick's Days because my club that you mentioned earlier was so successful that we were in Croke Park for what was then the date for the All-Ireland Club Finals. And I spent many a St. Patrick's Day in Croke Park. But that was yesteryear. Things are different now in that respect. But having enjoyed it.
I'd like to introduce you to American baseball. I went to college to play baseball, so I'd welcome you to that sport as well. But
can I take you up on the swim? I might take you up on that sometime.
Okay. Well, let me just thank the Taoiseach for being here. Really your commitment to the U.S.-Irish relationship, the bonds that connect our two countries, the people bonds, and the cultural ones, and the deep economic ones you spoke to today. Next year, we definitely want you in person in Washington. We're tired of this virtual stuff. We want to see everyone in person, the connectivity that you get from that. But I hope everyone will join me in providing a virtual round of applause for the Taoiseach, and just say that next time we hope to be in person. And thank you very much for your commitment to the relationship. Good luck with your meetings with the president and his team. And it's now my pleasure to turn over this task of chairing the next panel to our Senior Vice President for European Affairs, Marjorie Chorlins, who will moderate a conversation among business leaders and how we can continue to advance the economic relationship. Marjorie, over to you. Thank you again, Taoiseach, and thank you all for participating today, including our good friends from AmCham Ireland and from IBEC and from other organizations in Ireland. Thank you all.
Thank you, Myron. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good morning and good afternoon. I'm Marjorie Chorlins, Head of European Affairs at the U.S. Chamber. I want to thank the Taoiseach for spending the morning with us, talking about the importance of the transatlantic relationship and the U.S.-Irish relationship. It's a very special tie indeed, and we're delighted to have had the opportunity to host him. I'd like to thank Myron Brilliant as well for leading what I thought was a very interesting conversation. It's now my good fortune to spend a little bit of time with a couple of key executives in the pharmaceutical sector in the life sciences sector, talking about the role of U.S. and Irish business during the pandemic in sort of promoting innovation and collaboration as we have struggled to address one of the most significant challenges of our lifetime. This morning, I have the good fortune to be speaking with Dr. Steve Cutler, who is the CEO of an Irish-based company called ICON. ICON is a leading clinical research organization which has played a central role in providing support, in particular to Pfizer and BioNTech in the clinical trials for their vaccine, and also to Dr. Seamus Malone, who is the Vice President of Technical Services at Eli Lilly. Lilly may be, as you know, has developed a combination monoclonal antibody therapeutic treatment that has been shown to significantly reduce both hospitalization and death. So it is really an honor to spend a little bit of time this morning chatting with both of you. And I appreciate everyone's patience, as I know we've been extending the program just a wee bit. Dr. Cutler, Dr. Malone, let's talk a little bit about the impact of the pandemic on your companies, how in particular it's forced your companies to sort of refocus your strategies, how you responded to the pandemic, what opportunities it created for your companies, and how you responded. Why don't we start with you, Dr. Cutler?
Sure, Marjorie. Thank you for the introduction, and happy St. Patrick's Day to everybody, and morning to Seamus. Our company, ICON, is a proudly Irish-based organisation. The pandemic has really had a pretty significant impact on our business. First of all, it was about this time last year, of course, where we really had to move everybody to working from home. Typically 60% of our workforce were in the office, present in the office. We have offices all around the world, of course, about 15,000 people. And really, in the course of a couple of weeks, we had to move everybody, at least 95% of our people, to work from home. So just the sheer breadth and depth of the technology that was required to equip people, to do their job from home was quite a significant change for us. And our IT department did a wonderful job. A bit further on was really how we were going to continue to monitor the clinical trials that we were running. We run clinical trials for companies like Seamus's company, like Lilly, and many other pharmaceutical companies around the world. And so we had obviously an obligation and a commitment to continue those trials and to continue to monitor and manage those trials in a way that allowed the data that was being collected and being run, and the patients to be safe in those clinical trials. So we had to switch to a very much an off-site, a remote sort of monitoring approach, which was challenging, significantly challenging. We were only doing about 10% of our visits to these sites off-site remotely when the pandemic hit. And we changed that up to something like 80 or 90% of those visits over the period of a couple of months. So again, that pivot was very significant for us as the pandemic embraced, and as those sites, were impacted, of course, by the pandemic as well. But I was very proud of our organization and how we were able to continue those trials that we were running in a way that allowed, as I say, that data to continue to be collected, that the patients were kept safe, and we managed to bring that data in and to continue those trials. Of course, it's got better since then. Those sites have started to open up, and we're able to be more on site as required. But it's been a process really over the last 12 months or so.
Thanks very much. Dr. Malone, over to you. How has Lilly confronted the pandemic? What opportunities have arisen for you? And how has your company innovated in responding to these challenges?
Thanks, Marjorie. Many things very similar to Steve in some respects. Our immediate challenge was how to protect the safety of our employees and maintain the supply of our medications to 44 million patients worldwide. In January, February of 2020, we have a plant in China and Italy, and we learned very quickly what was going on. So we moved to what we called emergency management mode, and a mode that we're actually still in at the moment. So we moved office-based workers probably about 100% of those to work from home. And we, however, needed to retain 75% of people in plants to be able to make that work. That required quite a lot of hard work to adapt plants to that, both procedurally and physically to adapt plants to make sure people were safe. Very early on, we noticed surges in our orders as pharmacy chains and governments even tried to stockpile medications. And that was something that we had to actually actively work on with pharmacy chains and countries to persuade them not to do that, because ultimately patients would lose out in that scenario. So that was something we were successful with early on. We then set about securing transportation routes for most of our supply chains, both the internal supply chains and moving things on. We chartered planes to move medicines around. We spent a lot of time forecasting for our suppliers and giving them more visibility and more lead time on many of our critical supply orders. And I'm proud to say we actually kept our 14 manufacturing sites worldwide operational throughout the entire time. In fact, in 2020, we grew output from our manufacturing sites by about 10%, and we maintained our internal customer services metric at 99%, so which is about normal for us, or above that. So, you know, there was many things done there. We were very thankful to the Irish government, for example, in designating construction projects, some of them as essential projects. In our Kinsale site, we were racing to manufacture a very promising new Alzheimer's medication that's been in the news here in the last couple of days. And we hope to start that up here in October, and that's essential if we're going to try and achieve approval for that here in the near future. Our second big priority then was to use our R&D capabilities to develop treatment. Now, Lilly's not a vaccine company, it's a different technology, but we are good at biotechnology, and we use that to develop 2 antibodies to treat COVID patients. And just as you mentioned, Marjorie, there's recently been an announcement of a phase 3 clinical trial, which was released a couple of weeks ago, to say that the combination of the 2 antibodies is 87% effective in preventing death and hospitalization due to COVID in high-risk patients who test positive. So, in fact, there were no deaths in the treatment group. So, you know, very, very encouraging signs there for that medication. We started developing that medication in April of 2020. We did the first transfer of that medication to actually the Kinsale site in Ireland in September of 2020, and we received emergency use authorization then from the FDA in October of 2020. So that was 6 months from discovering that medication to getting that to patients and starting with patients, something that would normally take years. So extremely proud of the work done by everybody involved in that. And I think even the real value of that particular treatment is probably not even realized yet. Because, you know, as many people focus on trying to get vaccine delivery and get that up and running as being the solution, it's going to take some time globally. So really, we think there's a place for both the treatment and the vaccine to run in parallel for some time. And, you know, that's something that we're very focused on. In fact, you just can't accept that deaths could continue when we know they could be prevented. So, you know, that's probably some of the highlights from our time over the pandemic.
Thanks very much for that, Seamus. And sticking with you for just a moment, I mean, obviously, both of your companies were very successful in being able to respond quickly, both in terms of your own operations, your own employees, but also in terms of your ability to be part of the solution in responding to the pandemic. I wonder if you could talk about what it was that enabled your companies to pivot as effectively as you did, and in particular, how your strong presence and engagement in both the US and Ireland helped you in that regard. Seamus?
Sure. Sorry, Steve, I was about to jump in there. A couple of items when it come to mind. You know, first thing that impressed me a lot was how people internally rose to challenges in a time of crisis. I thought the type of teamwork and collaboration we saw was probably something you could only dream about in years earlier. People showed a lot of goodwill, creativity, and passion towards rising to the barriers and overcoming all sorts of barriers. And we also saw similar interaction across the industry. We have one purpose: we make medicine, and it's critical to get that to patients. So many things there that really helped in a collaborative work environment where people really see one common goal and can go for that. I think the second area was probably we got a lot of facilitation from the FDA, for example, in emergency use authorization. So we had over 30 meetings with the FDA in that 6-month time period, often turning around very technical details in 24 hours in both directions. So, very strong operation there. You mentioned the sort of US-Ireland interaction and try to take advantage of that. I mentioned earlier that the medication, the treatment antibody that we launched and have running and supplied, we very early on identified a group of scientists and engineers actually at the Kinsale Ireland site and asked them to work directly with R&D to ensure the design of the process that was being developed would fit immediately into manufacturing and could do so at speed. We also had we transferred that then to plants in both in Ireland and in the US, but the capacity in those wasn't sufficient to meet the needs that are there. So we identified agreements with other pharma companies, something sometimes unheard of, with plants in the US, Puerto Rico, Denmark, and South Korea. And we immediately set about transferring to those plants. One of those was involved with a Gates Foundation activity, which supplying 73 countries worldwide that would struggle to achieve getting vaccine supply in an early phase. So that was something we were very focused on. The same Lilly employees that were involved in the transfer into Ireland then took the lead in transferring the process quickly to those sites worldwide. And all of those sites are now up and running successfully. And it really showed what could be done extremely quickly. Very proud of the work that they've done in that time period. So there were some of the parts that I would think about.
Thanks, Seamus. Steve, how about you? How has ICON pivoted and how has your presence on both sides of the Atlantic contributed to that success?
Oh, I think without any doubt, Marjorie, our workforce has really facilitated that pivot. I was honestly incredibly impressed and dare I say it, a little surprised by how quickly we were able to address the challenges of the pandemic, whether it be working from home, whether it be, as I say, monitoring the trials. Our business is really not so much about innovation in terms of the science and the medicine. That's what Seamus and his team done, and they've done a magnificent job across the industry, really, in terms of the vaccines and the treatments that have come out for the pandemic. Our business is more in process and in collecting data and setting up clinical trials and doing that. And we were able to use the agility and the smarts of our workforce to be able to address the challenges of the pandemic very effectively, very quickly. In terms of the process, we were able to reimpose, if you like, on the way we run clinical trials. And that's what I was really so impressed about. It really, I think the whole pandemic for us offers a huge opportunity, notwithstanding the social and terrible health costs across the world. There are some opportunities for companies like ours in terms of the ability to do more clinical trials. I think people understand what a clinical trial is now. They understand the benefits of clinical trials, no matter what group you're in, active treatment or even placebo treatment. There are huge benefits of clinical trials, and I think that was underappreciated in society up until now. I think now people do recognize that, and I think that offers us an opportunity going forward to help with the development of new therapies, not just for COVID, but for other indications, oncology, cancer, immunology. There's a number of areas where we're working actively, and I know Seamus and his company are also working very actively to bring forward treatments. And the faster we do this and the more efficiently we do this, the better for everyone. And the pandemic has, I think, to a significant extent, helped us to understand that this is an important process. This is an important part of what we do as a society, and certainly within our industry. And so that offers, I think, huge opportunity for us going forward.
Thanks very much for that, Steve. I think you put your finger on a really important point, which is that notwithstanding the devastating toll that the pandemic has had on all of our countries, Nonetheless, there are certain opportunities and certain developments that have come out of it that hold the potential for being able to respond perhaps differently or more rapidly when, I suppose it is when rather than if, we confront another significant health challenge such as this. In addition to the business opportunities and the ways in which the companies have pivoted, there have obviously been some decisions taken in the public policy sphere related, for example, to supply chains, related to there's discussion, obviously, of intellectual property rights and so on. How have those conversations or those trends what challenges do you see with the direction that some public policy makers seem to be taking, the lessons they seem to be taking away in terms of either reshoring supply chains or basically sort of superseding companies' intellectual property rights in the drive to produce more medicines more quickly? Steve, do you have thoughts about that?
Sure, Marjorie. Yeah, this is interesting. For us, we're a service company. And so for us, supply chains across the world really relate to the people we bring to our clinical development programs. And as a significant global organization, and as one who's just doubled in size, actually, you'll be aware we've just made a significant acquisition of a competitor in the United States. And so our links with the United States have been significantly strengthened, or will be significantly strengthened once we close that acquisition in Q3 of this year. And so the ability for us to supply smart people across the world and for them to be involved in significant clinical development programs is very important. So it's not so much sort of sourcing components and widgets and materials, it's around labor laws and the ability for us to deploy them effectively in an agile manner. And so things like visa restrictions are very important. The free movement of people across geographies is very important for us, and the ability for us to develop those programs and for the ability for us to develop our company. So our link with the United States is a very significant one. The United States is the largest pharmaceutical market in the world, and obviously very important for us to be a key player. As I alluded to, this acquisition will make us one of the top 2 players in the clinical development space, CRO space anyway, in the world. And of course, a big part of that is the United States. So the ability for us to move executives to and from Ireland, as the case may be, is very important for us from a corporate point of view and from a development point of view. And we certainly see that as an area that we'd like to see continued progress on going forward.
Seamus, I assume that free movement of people is also important to Lilly, given that you have substantial operations in Ireland as well as here in the US. Can you talk a little bit about perhaps that challenge as well as some of the other challenges that I mentioned as far as supply chains, reshoring, and questions about intellectual property?
Thanks, Marjorie. Yeah, we do have some very similar challenges like that. At a personal level, I'll even mention, for example, that I'm here in the US since October, and for various travel restrictions and visa reasons, I'm here since then, and my family's in Ireland. So, that's something that is there. The same is true for many of our individuals. When it came to Christmas time, there was people sort of wanting to get back to Ireland, etc., but basically had to remain here. So, that was one of those things that was quite a challenge in the last while. Obviously, with plants in multiple locations, it's not just Ireland, it's also France and Italy, China, Japan, for example, for us. We have had a fair amount of change in practice in how we might try and do that. We're normally able to move between those plants, exchange people between those plants. One of our critical capabilities, I think, for Lilly is that overlap between R&D and manufacturing. And an overlap means you've got to get to know people, you've got to build trust, you've got to spend time in each other's areas and learn those areas. That helps with the speed, that helps with better tech transfers, it helps with improved outcomes for many of those things, and we really have seen that be valuable over the last few years. So that people movement is critical, and is something we would need to keep watching. The other part of it for us is also, we have big supply chains for our pharma products, and they're very complex. So any kind of sort of onshoring restrictions, those kinds of things, it obviously, what it does is it puts redundancy into the chain. For example, it potentially is very suboptimal in many respects. And some of those supply chains are just too complex across many countries. So if one country introduces a restriction, you're going to see a potential restriction be introduced by another. Ultimately, to me, that just is a bad impact for the patients at the end of the line. And so you want to get medications to patients as quickly as you can and as easily as you can. So I think that's one of the areas we really need to watch for. So to me, it's more about collaborative working together. And during the pandemic, we actually saw that within the company. We saw it across the industry in ways that we've not seen before. And I think that same reasoning can be used by governments, etc., in different ways. The other one I'll bring maybe attention to is the area of regulatory oversight of the industry. We're a highly regulated industry. One of the things that happened a couple of years ago was mutual recognition agreements between agencies like the FDA, the EMA, PMDA, etc. And that's made some progress. But the pandemic did show, for example, that those regulatory agencies were under extreme pressure to move quickly, to move things along. And without this sort of construct of mutual recognition more firmly in place, that probably was a barrier to movement. And I think that's an area that really has great opportunity to do more in. Mutual recognition across those agencies will give back capacity to each of those agencies to do what they're supposed to do, which is basically ensure that patients are well protected. It ensures that we might get more consistent regulations across all of those, and basically they can rely on one another to inspect, to interact with the companies, etc., in a very consistent way. Sometimes it's as simple as overcoming the hurdle. For example, during the pandemic, one of the most significant challenges has been the sourcing of sometimes what seem relatively simple things like a glass vial, for example. So one glass vial from supplier A, and you want to replace it with a glass vial from supplier B, that's actually quite a significant regulatory hurdle to overcome. You wouldn't think it with the same specifications and so on, but that is actually a significant thing because of the way we've registered. So there's definitely opportunity in things like that to free up those kinds of interactions and focus more on the core science of the medication itself, what's potentially critical to those and so on, and to sort of focus resources in the best areas. So I think that's definitely an area that could look at, including, for example, we could go to mutual recognition in the clinical space as well. So those are definitely areas I think that there's plenty of opportunity in. I also think maybe not just focused on chasing after the existing supply of medication. One of the things here is there's huge growth in this area coming, basically. There's huge growth to ensure we've got contingency. So I think there's plenty of opportunities for countries to ensure that we have distributed supply chains in place, cooperating well together. We also don't know what the next pandemic or disaster form is going to be. So we've got to be careful in sort of just designing off the current pandemic and ensure that we're ready for whatever that may be, and ensure there's flexibility in supply chains to be able to deal with that.
Well, I think you've put your finger on a number of critical sort of public policy issues that certainly we're focused on at the Chamber in terms of the free movement of people, in terms of regulatory approvals, and so on. I assume for both of you, obviously, free flows of data are also very much top of mind. And clearly that's an issue that currently between the US and Europe, we're working to resolve. Hopefully that is something that we can achieve in the very near future, because I think it is essential, not just to your sector, but really across all sectors. Seamus, you mentioned briefly collaboration even within the industry. And I'm aware, for example, of one company agreeing to manufacture another's drug, and I assume that that is not a common thing. I'm wondering from both of you what changes you do see coming out of this as far as collaboration within the industry that you will carry forward into the future. Steve, why don't we start with you on that?
I think we're in a slightly different situation to Seamus, and there has been. I want to say the pharmaceutical industry has collaborated extensively across, not just in terms of manufacturing, but in terms of helping with the developments and helping with even the research sides of things. So that's been unprecedented, and I think the pharmaceutical industry has done itself a power of good in the public's eyes. I think in terms of what's happened over the COVID, our sector is more in the service sector, and so us collaborating with our competitors, we have to be very careful with that. Of course, there's opportunity, and there's certainly. I happen to be president of ACRO at the moment. That's the Association of CROs, and so we collaborate in terms of helping to improve the awareness of clinical trials, the benefits of clinical trials, the diversity of patients and inclusion of patients. That's been a big factor in the pandemic as well. We wanted to make sure that all sectors of society and racially, ethnically have been included in the trials to make sure that the trials actually reflect society, and the results of those trials are relevant for all parts of society. So that's been an important initiative that ACRO continues to drive forward, and we're not finished there yet. There's a lot to do in that respect. So in terms of collaboration, we collaborate at more an industry level than at an individual company level. We have to be obviously very cognizant of that, but it's certainly been an area that we're keen to do. We want to develop. We want to develop our industry. We want to develop drugs and devices much more efficiently than they're done at the moment. And I think there's a huge opportunity for our industry, the CRO industry, to collaborate to do that in a more effective way going forward.
Fantastic. Seamus, how about from your perspective?
Yeah, it has happened occasionally. Sometimes there are partnerships on products, so it's not always as common as some of the things, but normally we're interacting with contract manufacturing organizations, for example, in our case, and we all do that to just make sure we've got surge capacity or different types of capacity in different locations. But there are examples. We have a collaboration with Pfizer actually on a pain medication that we have joint sales reps in different countries, etc. So those kinds of projects occasionally come up, and sometimes they're historically based on the origin of the medication and so on. So those have happened. Definitely during the pandemic, there was a lot more openness to it. Because, as I say, people rose above some of that and just sort of said, look, we need to do something here. We need to ensure that we can do this as quickly as possible. And people recognized the challenge of the speed needed as something that was really the factor to go for. It wasn't really about competition. It wasn't really about who made the most or anything like that. So, there were calls routinely often between CEOs of one company and another company, literally inquiring about, we've got this medication, we don't have all the capacity we need your potential help in this, would you be willing to help? And that kind of activity took a lot of discussion, and there was quite a number of those. We were approached by other companies as well to help them in some of their medications. I'm aware of situations even where, I know one company who donated vials that they had in stock that were of no longer use to them to another company to be used in the medication they had, because it was a different size to what they had in their pipeline, and it was something the other company needed. So, those kinds of things were just tremendous positive indications. The other areas, you've got groups like FPIA and PIA, and then some other groups like the Bioforum and places like that, which there's quite a bit of collaboration across the industry on common practices. How do you most effectively meet the expectations of regulators in doing good manufacturing practices, in doing good clinical practices, etc. Those are the kinds of areas that you're not sharing your IP, you're not sharing, your sort of your competitive materials or anything like that, but you are sharing practices that really you want to see happen for the good of patients. And so ultimately, those are strong areas of collaboration and ways that we could continue to work, basically, in many ways.
Fantastic. Well, I have to say, we are trying wherever we can to find a silver lining or the opportunities, as Steve mentioned earlier, coming out of the pandemic. It's been obviously too easy to focus on all of the downsides for good reason, but clearly there are some changes on the horizon that we hope will be sustained in terms of, as you say, greater awareness among regulators, not only about the challenges, but also about ways in which collaboration would actually work to everyone's advantage. And I mean that not just within the sector or individual countries, but also in terms of the transatlantic relationship. So from our perspective, from the Chamber's perspective, obviously, we are active proponents of a strong relationship with Europe, with Ireland, of course, but we do think there is plenty of work yet to do on both sides as we emerge from, hopefully sooner rather than later, the current crisis we face. We are coming up on the end of our time together, but I would be remiss if I didn't ask you. Obviously, this panel is taking place in the context of the Taoiseach's virtual visit to Washington, and obviously he's doing that around the time of one of our favorite holidays, St. Patrick's Day. So I would have to ask both of you, as proud Irishmen, how will you celebrate St. Patrick's Day? Seamus, how about you?
Well, it's a working day here in the US, and my boss, who's also an Irishman, basically is not letting up. So I'll be at work during the day, but I'll take time to phone family and friends at home, talk to my parents, basically, talk to my children, and so on, talk to my wife, basically, and brothers and sisters who are back in Ireland and the UK, basically. So that's probably what I'll do, and wish everybody well.
And I imagine you'll look forward to being able to celebrate with them in person
Eventually.
on the next St. Patrick's Day. Steve, how about you? How will you spend the holiday?
Marjorie, I'm also in the US, like Seamus, and in fact, I'm not an Irishman. I'm an Australian, as you can probably tell by my accent. So, however, I do think the Australians and the Irish, and it's kind of the way the Irish operate, that welcoming culture, that ability to benefit and to be very open-minded and open-facing, I think is one of the great strengths of the Irish culture. We're proudly, as I said, a proudly Irish organisation headquartered in Dublin, and I feel very proud to be an Australian at the head of that organisation. But we have that Irish culture, and so I'll be spending it with a quiet Guinness at home with my wife, and also saying hello to my friends in Ireland and in the United States as well.
Well, shame on me for not recognizing the Australian accent, but you represent the Irish company very well indeed. I want to thank you both for spending some time with us this morning and for your great insights. I think it's extraordinarily important to demonstrate the strength of the transatlantic relationship and how companies can be very successful with a presence on both sides of the Atlantic. I also will want to thank the Taoiseach for having spent some time with us as well today, and for his personal commitment to the U.S. Similarly with Ambassador Mulhall, who has been a wonderful friend of the Chamber and an excellent steward of the U.S.-Irish relationship. The Irish Embassy has been extraordinarily helpful in pulling together these events. We're very grateful for their hard work. I personally am very grateful as well for the team at the Chamber for all of the work that they have done in pulling together today's events. I hope that we will have the opportunity to meet both of you in person in the coming months, whether here or in Dublin. And I want to thank our audience as well for joining us today. With that, I wish you a very happy and safe St. Patrick's Day tomorrow, and I bid you farewell.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marjorie. Good luck, Steve.
Thanks, Seamus.